Okay, let's get some practice with NPV. So along with the link to this video, you should have access to a PDF with another version of the case study of the new minivan launch that we use for break even. And as a reminder, the scenario and the data that we use for these exercises in the video, just for example purposes, and we got the data from running a hypothetical scenario through the StratSim management simulation. So this is the NPV case study in the PDF, and it builds on that same minivan development and launch. It gives details of what your team has come up with to develop and sell the new minivan. And as before, you've got your team's estimate of the base costs, development costs, how much they'd like to spend on advertising, and what a suggested price would be for the minivan. But here's the twist. It also gives you a yearly breakdown of your costs, because development, retooling, and advertising are each spread out over 3 years in the scenario. They don't just all happen in 1 year and all at the same time. So we're going to use that yearly data in our NPV calculations. And the description also gives you the opportunity cost of capital that the company expects to clear for a project like this, which is 12%. So that will be an important input into the calculations that we do. And the formula you can see over here on the right for NPV is detailed for you. Okay, for this exercise, rather than have you crunch through all this data to organize it and detail it, we've done that actually for you already. We've taken the data from the scenario and plotted the undiscounted cash flows each year for 5 years. And we'll use the NPV approach to discount these cash flows and account for the time value of money. So as you look at these undiscounted cash flows, you can see that there are negative cash flows for the first 3 years coming from the development costs that spread out, $520 million as an expense each of those years. And then in year 3, there's also the first set of retooling and advertising expenses, and those costs continue through years 4 and 5. But also notice that we have positive gross profit starting in year 3 when we're done developing the minivan and we actually start selling it. And that gross profit grows each year through the 5th year in this scenario. Okay, so let's use this set of data for our analysis, and let's calculate the NPV, the discounted cash flows, based on these undiscounted raw cash flows. And in the PDF, we've given you a blank form you can fill in that looks like this. And you can use the bar chart that we just looked at in the PDF. It's also there, and it's got the undiscounted cash flows so that you can fill in the cash flows into this form, total them, discount them at the 12% opportunity cost of capital that was talked about in the case study, then add them all up to get the total NPV. So the flow of the worksheet here is that for each year, you're going to do the following. First, you'll put in the undiscounted cash flows from the bar chart into the top set of fields, and then you'll total the cash flows for each year. And then you'll divide that total for each year by the quantity you see that's 1 plus the opportunity cost of capital from the case study. And that, as you can see, the equation is to the power of the year, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And that's the discounted cash flow for the year. And when you add all of those together at the bottom of our form here, boom, you've got the net present value. And as you're going through the exercise, also be thinking about whether you'd invest in this project or not once you've got the NPV, and see how it plays out. All right, well, you can pause the video and work through it, and when you're ready, restart the video and we'll walk through the solution, which, as you also know, is actually in the PDF as well. All right, see you in a minute. Okay, welcome back. Hope you got through the calculations okay. And on the previous slide, I already went through the flow of these calculations, and you can read through the numbers on the slide or in the PDF, but I wanted to point out a few interesting things. Look what happens to your first 2 years of development costs when they're discounted. In the second year, for example, the $520 million expense only feels like $414 million in present value after you discount it. And when you've added up all the discounted cash flows, this project, it's got a negative net present value, even though it's got these, as you can see at the top in years 3, 4, and 5, these great big profits in those years. But they're undiscounted when you look at the top of this form. So they look larger than they really should be considered. And that's why you need to discount them to really get a sense for their value. Okay, having done all the calculations and seeing that this project does have a negative net present value, are you going to actually do it? What do you think? Okay, well, here are a few ideas of points that an analyst would consider. And as we said before, the capital committee at this company would for sure consider. See what you think of them and see if you came up with any others. But the first obvious thing is that it's got a negative NPV, so it's losing money in present value terms. And if there are other better options, we'd probably do those instead. So if your decision was just based on NPV, no, you probably would not do this project. But are there other factors that should be considered before this one is tossed out? And the answer is yes, there probably are. For instance, what about years 6 or 7? Could we generate even more profit that could make this project worthwhile at that point? Or there actually maybe even other costs that we didn't add in that would make the project even less attractive. But on the other hand, too, you might think about whether this project is a good starting point for some other great projects or products that we have in mind that could be based on it as a foundation. And how about trying different discount rates? We use 12% in our calculations, but what if the rate used by the company changed either now or even into the future? You could use different rates for different years. And how about generally think at the highest level of our strategy as a company? Does this project give us a first mover advantage in the marketplace or some other strategic benefit that might actually make it worthwhile? So those would be a few things to think about as you decide whether or not to do the project. Okay, hope that exercise helped, and thanks for watching.